Hey friends, hope the morning's treating you well. I left my coffee back at the hotel, but I hope you got yours if you want some. I'm in Falkenburg, Sweden, playing gigs over here on tour. This is the Atrin River. It's nice and loud. I'm going to sleep, my hotel's just right there. I'm going to sleep with the windows open tonight and listen to that river, which will be pretty damn great. But I'm recording this on Friday because I don't have any time to do it any other time. It's the only time I can get to it. But like I said, I'm here in Falkenburg, going to play a gig tonight. This is one of the first places I ever played in Sweden many, many years ago. As a matter of fact, the promoters for this gig, the very first gig they ever promoted was one of mine. They said they got into promoting gigs so they could have me come to Falkenburg, and I'm very, very proud of that. That's happened to quite a few different places over the years, and they've gone on to promote a lot of other artists since then. So like I said, I'm pretty proud of that. If I have a legacy, it's things like that and the trees I've planted, probably more than anything. But first time I was here, the salmon were running up the river. You could see the salmon jumping. I remember just standing out here and watching them. And other times I've been here, people were fishing and catching salmon out of the river. But I flew over, and man, I had like the craziest bad flights over here. I've had a lot of bad luck here recently, and I think a lot of people have. We really need to talk about air travel in the United States right now. It's rough. If you can avoid flying somewhere right now, you know, I would advise you to think twice about flying unless you have to. I should take my own advice on that. But before I left, and I did a very long video breaking all of this down and telling a lot of the ugly details of it for my Patreon folks and my channel members. And you can find that if you want to go looking for it amongst that. But like the quick version is I bought my flights over here. I paid more because I wanted to have less connections and have more of a chance of not having things messed up, less fail points. I could have gotten a flight for under $600, which is really freaking cheap, round trip to Stockholm from Indianapolis with a lot of connections. And I passed that up. I paid a little over $1,000, which is still pretty cheap, to fly up to Chicago and then straight to Stockholm. And about a week before I left, I got a email saying my flights have been canceled. So I should get back and reschedule. I rescheduled. The night before I flew out, it was like talking 12 hours before, I got an email saying my flight was canceled, and I had to call and reschedule. The next morning I go to Indianapolis Airport, I check in, and right as I go to leave, the woman says, "Come back here, sir, come back here, sir. I just got information that you're not going to make it. We need to reschedule your flight." So they canceled that, rescheduled me. I ended up having to go Indianapolis to Washington Dulles to Munich to Stockholm. And that just happens to be the flight that would have been under $600 if I would have done it that way originally. But I paid over $1,000 for it. When I got to Dulles, they said the plane was out of commission. I should say that I was in Indianapolis Airport for 5 hours waiting for the very first rescheduled flight to leave. And when I got to Washington Dulles, man, I waited at least 5 hours while they were trying to find another plane. And it was getting late at night, and I was thinking there's no way this flight's actually going to leave. And somehow it did. I made it to Munich and then missed the connection because of all the delays. They rescheduled me on another flight. I went to Stockholm. I ended up making it, but my bags did not make it. So it was 36 hours and to get from Indianapolis to Stockholm of being in airports. Very uncomfortable and very tired. I got to the hotel. I gave them my information for the room, and they said they had no record of it. So I couldn't check into the hotel, and I said, "Well, do you have vacancy?" And they said, "Yes, we have vacancy." "Let me buy another room." So I bought a room. I thought, I will deal with all of this tomorrow, or down the road. And just so tired. I can't describe how tired I was. I called Amy, said I'm here, you know, and she said I sounded like I was in a terrible mood. But I made it over here. I'm safe. And the next day, I was in a really good mood. And I'm not really sure why, but I just kind of woke up and I slept 13 hours. I'm like, well, I'm in Sweden, you know, and I called Amy and talking to her, and she's like, I can't believe you're in as good a mood as you are. And I was like, yeah. You know, she said, after all you went through yesterday, and well, that was yesterday. And today I'm in Sweden. I'm going to play a gig tonight for some people who dig my music, and they're going to know the songs. And I'm feeling pretty good about that. So I rallied. I saw my buddy Bjorn. He picked me up at the hotel. We went over and I played the gig. Actually, we were upstairs, and he was showing me a Todd Snyder video and of Todd telling a story. And I didn't think I'd ever heard it, but once I was watching the story, I'm like, oh yeah, I remember that one. And I look, I'm like, oh God, I'm supposed to play. So I run down. I'd already sound checked a long time earlier. I'm in the band room at this point. I run downstairs and I go in, get up on the stage, and I look, and the place is packed. Like Uppsala. It's the very first place I ever played in Sweden way back when. And the room was packed, and it was a great gig. It was really fun, lots of good energy. You know, when you're tired and jet lagged and beat down, it really helps when the audience wants to have a good time. That's not always the way it is, but that night everybody wanted to have a good time, and we had a good time. It was a really, really good, fun gig, and helped me get through it. And then the next day, actually that night I drove to Mariefred to check into a hotel. It was an hour and a half drive. It's where I had the gig the next day. And as I was coming around, as I was driving on these rural roads, there's moose crossing signs everywhere. And it's late at night, and I'm kind of gripping the wheel and trying to stay alert. And the speed limits were all 80 or 70 kilometers per hour. You can do the math. I think 80, somebody told me that that's 50 miles an hour, so it wasn't going too fast. And I'm just watching, and man, I'd come around this corner, and there's this huge moose. I mean, huge, just kind of like walking off the road real slow. Like his hindquarters were still on the road, and he was moving real slow. It was like the brontosaurus in Jurassic Park, but really long, slow strides. And it was just huge. It was beautiful. You know, it just looked like this beautiful ghostly figure. And I'm looking up at it from the car as I go by. It's that big. And if it was coming onto the road, I would have hit it. And that would have been terrible. But it was going off the road, and I missed it. And I just like, oh my God. So I got to see a moose. And I hit a deer. Me and my buddy Todd Fox hit a deer years ago. I used to love driving at night. Long drives after the gig. Used to love it. And we hit a deer heading to Iowa, somewhere in Illinois. Totaled the car as a rental car. I'll tell that story sometime. It's terrible. Horrible thing. Gruesome. And from that point on, I just don't like driving at night anymore. It was something I once loved, and I just don't want to do it anymore. And so I did it that night. And luckily, I did not hit that moose. I felt pretty good about it. But I walked around. There's a castle there. The king of Sweden lived there 500 years ago. There's a story behind it that I don't remember all the details, but I got to sit down at this picnic table in a big opening. And about 100 ducks walked up to me while I'm filming this video for my Patreon members and my channel members here. And it was pretty fun. There's ducks all around me. I was in a good mood. It was nice. And I played a gig that night. At every one of these gigs, there's been people who watch this channel. And you forget the power of the internet. You know, I'm just like some guy that's usually standing in my backyard in Indiana or like somewhere down in Nashville or something. And you just upload this thing. When I started the channel, I mean, honestly, going back 20 years, my whole idea with art is I will put messages in a bottle and you throw it out into the ocean and you just see where it lands, and just make things, create things and express yourself. It's what I do and what I've always done, without the idea of I'm going to make a bunch of money off of this. And it's like, no, I want to do this. This is something I think I want to make cool shit. I want to express myself. I want to write songs and make records. I want to talk to people on YouTube about things that I care about, things like that. YouTube is an extension of that. My podcast was that. I used to say there were only two people in art that mattered. There's the creative individual and the person experiencing it. Everything else is an artificial filter. I still believe that. And this is a way to share things with you guys without any filters whatsoever. I still believe that. I would say that at the beginning of all the podcasts, the audio ones. And if you don't know about my podcast, go look it up. Thanks for Giving a Damn, Otis Gibbs. You can find that out there. There's 170 or so episodes. But back to the subject. All of this, the way I look at it, I make something without the idea of how to monetize things or whatever. Just try to keep going and put it in a bottle and throw it out into the ocean and then make the next thing and worry about that. And man, at these gigs, this happened in England and Spain. Where else have I been since the pandemic? The Netherlands, in Texas, all across the East Coast and through the Midwest of the Todd Snyder Tours. People just come up and, hey man, I really enjoy watching your YouTube channels. I dig the Saturday morning coffee talks, which I'm doing now, and I don't have coffee. But and you just don't know who's out there watching or listening. But it's pretty beautiful to be in a room with somebody who is. I remember a guy named Bjorn, who's one of my Patreon members and supports this channel on Patreon. He showed up at that gig at Maryford, him and his wife, and we hung out and shot the shit for a while. Really nice cat. And I'm like, well, if we lived in the same city, man, we'd be buddies and hanging out, Instead, we're hanging out on the internet. And it's beautiful. That's all. Had a guy, I forget where I was, maybe it was last night, say, hey, tell Uncle Larry I said hey. I thought that was pretty damn funny. I'm going to text that to Tom Bukovac. And anyway, man, it's nice to be out here playing gigs. It's nice to be standing next to a river. It's uncomfortable. The driving and the travel is harder than it used to be. And air travel is just getting worse and worse as the years go by, and I don't know where that ends. There's a lot of reasons for it, and I get it. There are legitimate reasons and all that. I don't know where it ends, but it gets harder and harder to do the day-to-day of it, but it feels really great when the gig comes around and people care and when they're listening and attentive. So I'm looking forward to Falkenburg tonight. I don't know where I'm at tomorrow. I usually can't pronounce the names of the towns, but it's always great to be here amongst it. So I'm going to sign off. Maybe you guys can tell me where you're at. Oh, and the good thing is I think I'm going to get my money back for that flight, so I probably would have flown over for free is how it'll turn out. And I just hope that I don't know if you've seen the videos I've made over the last years about the problems I've had with air travel, but just a couple months ago I was flying back from Copenhagen, and I always stay up on my flights back to the States. I stay up and watch bad monster movies and stuff so that when I land and get home, it's at nighttime and I can go right to bed and I'm back on a sleep schedule pretty easy. So I stayed awake on that Copenhagen flight. I landed at JFK in New York and they told me my flight to Indianapolis was canceled and it would be at least 48 hours before another flight left to Indianapolis, and they could not guarantee me that I'd be on it. And I'm like, good Lord. So I look and hotel prices are through the roof. And I said, screw it. And I went and rented a car and I drove 12 hours. After flying back from Copenhagen, I got off the plane, got in the car, drove 12 hours back to Indianapolis just to get home. So it's getting a little rough out there. And I've made some videos about some of the troubles. Maybe I'll put link to one of those here. I'm not sure where that ends, but I think at least I'll get the money back from this one. And I don't know, I'd rather have a comfortable flight. But anyway, I'm running on. I hope things are good with you guys. And if you're traveling, well, that's one thing I forgot to say before I wind this down. I visited a spot where the Metallica tour bus crashed here in Sweden, somewhere in the middle of nowhere, and where Cliff Burton died, the bass player in Metallica. And I made a little video there that I'm going to try to upload sometime in the next week. Click on that if you see it. I don't know when I'll have time to put it together, but I will upload that. And I'm going to stop off at some other things and enjoy it. Wanted to pay my respects to a fellow traveler who did not make it out on the road. But if you're out on the road, I hope you take care of each other and stay safe. And I'll see you somewhere down the road. Much love to you.